Hey guys, welcome back for another episode of The Suited Shootist. And since I'm just coming off of the Green Ops class and I've got the Rangemaster Tactical Conference here in a couple of weeks, I figured what I wanted to touch on is kind of how I prep for a class. Just because if you're newer to this and you're starting to get into taking open enrollment training classes, it is definitely helpful to kind of have a primer of where to start, and maybe there's something that I'm doing that you might find useful. So just kind of jumping right into it, the first thing is I kind of have two different sets of gear. The first, I've got my actual lethal gear, and then I've got my inert training gear, and I personally keep them in two dedicated, very visually distinct bags from one another. So if I'm actually taking a combatives style class or something where we're going to be going hands-on, then that is where I've got, blue guns. I went ahead and made myself my own little kind of inert sap, so I've got that. I probably ought to actually order a knock knife, but I also made my own kind of inert kind of clinch pick analog, so that way I've got that. I've also got an inert pepper spray in here, as well as my trainer version of my clinch pick, because again, there's only so much that you can do with live agents. And so if you're really going to pressure test whether your concepts work, whether your tactics work, and whether or not your gear works, you need to have a way to do that in a manner that is not going to endanger your training partners, because otherwise nobody wants to play with you. The other thing that is not dedicated as a just for the inert bag, this is something that goes with me to every training class, is my logbook, my notebook. Because I've been hit in the head a couple times, so my memory is not necessarily the greatest, and I can tell you that it is invaluable to be able to go back and reference what it is that was covered. And in addition, if you know anything about adult learning, it does help to cement the idea if you are physically writing it down than if you are just listening to it being discussed. So the notebook is an essential piece that is going to kind of bridge from the inert bag into the ert bag, to steal a Chuck Haggardism. So that's for if I'm doing the hands-on stuff. If I'm going to a more traditional class where it's going to be, live active range and things like that, then obviously that's where some of the gear comes into play. In addition to my dedicated carry rig, which at this point is a Glock 19 in a limited edition Orion holster in a blue paisley Suited Shootist print from Darkstar Gear on an Enigma chassis with the Papoose cover on it. Yeah, that's a lot of words. This is what I carry on a regular basis. So for whatever reason, a few years back, I decided that what I wanted to do is, instead of constantly loading and unloading the same firearm, and instead of constantly loading and unloading the same hollow point ammunition, what I would do is simply have the ability to take my live gun out, put it in a separate holster, and then be able to just break out my training gun and slap it into whatever rig I was running. Now, the only real difference is that my training Glock is a Gen 3, my carry Glock is a Gen 5. I've kind of removed the finger grooves on it. I put a magwell on there just because last time I was doing any real appreciable reload work, I was pinching the ever-loving shit out of the meat of my hand, and so I just went with the cheap Magpul grip there to keep that from happening. So I've got my dedicated training pistol. One thing that really is invaluable whenever you're taking a live fire class is you want to have electronic ear pro. Now, these are Howard Lates by Honeywell. Honestly, if I were to go back and do it again, the ear cups on these are a little stiff. So especially if I'm wearing them for a full day, they do start to get a little bit uncomfortable. But in general, electronic ear pro is really where you want to be, because it allows you to still hear range commands a lot better, but still protect your hearing from the sounds of gunfire. So that's just kind of a given. For iPro, right now I'm just running these Smith & Wesson whatevers. I like the fact that they have easily interchangeable lenses from clear to gray. They've also got a couple colors in there for different inclement weather, but they're just kind of sunglass configuration, but they are sufficiently wraparound that when I've got them on, there's no way for brass to really get in, so it gives me sufficient coverage that my eyes are actually protected. When it comes to added protection, in addition to the individual first aid kit that I just carry, I have a dedicated one in my range bag as well, and it's just a carbon copy of what I normally carry on my person. So there's a cat tourniquet, a couple sets of gloves, a chest seal, some quick clot gauze, as well as a few other items in there. You can see that addressed more in depth in the Dark Angel Medical video that I talk about, but I do have a dedicated trauma kit that just lives and stays in my range bag in addition to the one that I have on my person. When it comes to reloads, I'm not the kind of person that generally carries a reload on them with any real level of frequency. So because of that, I kind of just mess around with a few different options. I've got a couple various IWB mag carriers. I've got a hard-sided one here from KSG Armory that has served me exceptionally well. I've got a Koala from Darkstar that is also pretty cool because it gives you a lot more adjustability in terms of ride height. And the one that I'm playing around with now is the Ascent pouch from Filster, because talking with John, he actually runs his on the Enigma belt. And so I'm seeing if this really is going to give me a less obtrusive way to carry a reload than I've found up to this point. I'm definitely not one of those people that thinks you gotta carry a reload as a civilian defender just based on my personal lifestyle, risk profile, and all that jazz. If you are going to carry one, cool, rock on. It's really none of my business, as long as you are not forsaking the arguably more useful elements of less lethal medical and illumination. So mag carriers for me are almost exclusively a training element. Then when it comes to the idea of training how you fight, I at least make a point to periodically try and flush out the ideas of my carry gear in the most challenging wardrobe configuration possible. I actually have a dedicated suit, so pants and matching jacket. These are just a cheap polyester Van Heusen that I got at an outlet mall 5-6 years ago at this point, that I'm perfectly okay getting ripped or torn up either against my gear or getting seams opening up and fabric torn in a combative element. It's interesting because I did actually take ECQC wearing a suit coat, and it didn't present any real appreciable obstacles for me. Now, I did run it open and unbuttoned as opposed to actually buttoned up, but it didn't really hinder my movement. Nobody tried to get super creative and use any kind of like gi style tie-ups on me in any of the clinch, so that was definitely kind of an eye-opening experience. But it helps to have as close to your daily wear for dedicated range gear as possible, especially when you start talking about some of the pressure testing stuff. Because if you're like me and some of your actual street clothing is nicer, I say that, right now I'm sitting here in a Kohl's Henley, so it's not like I'm, only buying obnoxiously high-end designer stuff. But point being is I'm a lot more inclined to take a class wearing that suit than one of my nice suits. But it still gives me the opportunity to identify what some of those challenges are. And as you'll see in some of the photographs here, I've identified some challenges. So it's good to be able to actually have that failure occur in a controlled, low-consequence environment. If you're taking a multi-day class, even if you're taking a one-day class, generally there's always some kind of break for lunch. I always just go super basic, something like protein bars or something like that, because number one, I'm one of those people, I can go all day without eating. Intermittent fasting is kind of part of what I do normally, but number one, this allows me to eat something without having to touch it. So if for whatever reason I don't have the facility option of washing my hands to get the lead off, I still can eat something without having to directly touch my food. Also, it's not uncommon for some instructors to kind of run a working lunch, or at the very least, kind of have a secondary lecture/story time that can be incredibly valuable information. And if you're in a position where you're even just, running to whatever the local burger place is to hit the drive-thru, you might be missing out on something in that 15, 20, 30-minute window that you would otherwise benefit from. So it definitely helps to have some kind of food source on hand, just so that way you're really maximizing the amount of time that you are present and attentive in the class. The other thing that I always bring, and it's honestly because I'm just a caffeine junkie, is I'll bring my own coffee in the morning, but I also will travel with a whole mess of Strikeforce. I found out about these on a podcast that I've no longer listened to, but what I like about it is it's single-serve energy drink concentrate that you can just dump into an existing water bottle, Nalgene, or what have you. And so I can just grab a fistful of these and basically have a case's worth of energy drink on board and score some points, with other guys in the class. If, somebody's kind of fading a little bit and they need an afternoon pick-me-up, these are definitely a handy little thing to have. I do have an affiliate relationship with them, but I've been using them well before that was ever established. So there's a coupon code down below if you want to check it out. They got a couple of flavors. Lemon, I think, is probably my favorite, at least. But so these help quite a bit as well. And then I had mentioned it kind of in regards to the food, but if you can get your hands on them, the D-lead wipes are incredibly useful, because again, a lot of these range facilities don't necessarily have running water. So if you don't have access to plumbing and you need to get all that lead off of your hands, then that is a good option. So that's kind of the rundown of how I gear up for a class. If it's something where there's going to be a real aggressive lecture portion, like Mag 40 or Mag 20, the classroom version being a prime example, or when I took Dr. April's Unthinkable class, don't even bother with the notebook, bring a laptop, because the volume of information that comes up in classes like that you're not going to be able to keep up with handwritten notes. So that's definitely a consideration there. And I also obviously don't go without my phone. Now I can't show you that because that's how I'm filming this, but recording whatever elements of it the instructor is cool with is incredibly helpful as well, because again, it allows you to revisit the material and make sure that you didn't misremember something. So even if you're not putting it up on the gram, which some instructors are cool with, some prefer to kind of control some of that material for various reasons. If they're okay with you recording it, definitely do that. check with them obviously before you start distributing it in any kind of fashion. So that's just kind of very high level how I gear up for these sorts of things. There's also going to be the circumstantial considerations, inclement weather. I was so grossly unprepared for the 20 something degree temperatures in Bryan that it wasn't even funny. But that's definitely kind of the outlier. So just basics, wet weather gear. Having a camp chair ain't a bad idea either, but that's really about it. So that's typically how I gear up for a class. That's how I'm going to be geared up for TACCon. And if any of you guys are going to be there, find me. Let's link up. I'd love to see some of y'all. Definitely looking forward to seeing the folks again that I met in New Orleans. So hope everybody has a great week and stay sharp.